Alright, fuckers, happy Halloween. Now, this is gonna be the final Q&A where I'll basically answer everybody's questions. Now, this video is not going to be split into separate parts. I'm gonna answer everybody's questions and not try to spend too much time answering each one, because I'd be here all day. So, I'm just gonna answer all the questions and just get it over with. Alright, so the first question we have here is from the Good Taste Guy. And he asked, do you think rock and metal will ever be mainstream again? Honestly, at this point in time, it's very unlikely. Rock and metal, as far as I'm concerned, is pretty much a dying genre, because the mainstream media seems to have this prejudice against any type of heavy music. Because what? It's supposedly satanic? Even if you want to go by that stupid stereotype that the genre is for Satanists, you could also say the same thing about rap music promoting a lot of gang violence in their songs. And the same goes for a lot of these pop artists like Miley Cyrus, who teach a lot of these young teenage girls how to be despicable sluts. At least with rock and metal music, most bands out there sing more about more real-world problems, but yet that's seen as the devil's music. And here's a fun fact. Most metalheads out there are a lot less violent compared to most rap and pop listeners, especially to a lot of rap listeners who act ghetto and start fights for no reason. Most metalheads out there are some of the nicest people you'll ever meet, and these are the same people that listen to really aggressive music, whereas most rap fans come off to me like a bunch of douchebags. Oh, but metal music is evil. Well, so is a lot of pop and rap music. If you're gonna say metal is evil, then you need to say the same thing about a lot of pop and rap music. I mean, seriously, have you listened to the lyrics to some of the most popular rap and pop songs? Listen to a lot of that garbage and compare that to what you would listen to from a band like Catatonia. Pfft, fucking liberals. No, metal isn't evil. It's the society that we live in today that's the real evil. Rarely is it in my everyday life do I hear people listen to heavy music. When I go to work every day, it's the same stupid millennials blasting their shitty mumble rap music. And this happens everywhere I go. And I'm so sick of it. And of course, those people don't care about rock music because they're a bunch of brainwashed faggots who listen to garbage, with a lot of this hip-hop culture influencing a lot of people, even out of the black culture, to think it's cool. And a lot of times I wish I never lived in the urban area with so many fucking minorities, because the urban culture is so fucking overrated. It's no joke, man. Like, a lot of people are just rude to each other. It's just... Ugh. Fuck, man. Sometimes I wish I could live in the suburbs, which is mostly white Caucasian dominant, but I do know that rock music is more appreciated to white people than a lot of nationalities out there. But I mean, with the black culture, it always has to revolve around the same stuff. Rap music, fucking R&B, and fucking reggae music, cause it's fucking gay. And it's actually really funny, because certain people out there believe that rap music killed rock and metal music, which isn't the case. Metalheads and metal itself killed metal, and are a part of the reason this generation isn't into this genre. For one thing, metal critics buried almost every new style that came out, which pretty much prevented metal from ever evolving. Plus, so many in the metal scene were against it being mainstream and popular because of the fear of watering it down. Plus, a lot of these record labels were no help either, because when grunge started to die off, these companies were really starting to push rap and pop music to a large margin, whether it was in movie trailers or commercials, etc. Back in the mid-2000s, I saw Guitar Hero as a perfect opportunity to push rock and metal into the mainstream again. But of course, idiots kept pushing older bands past their prime, and would only talk about the older bands that have already been established, and peaked like decades ago. So now we have a bunch of hipster millennials and Gen Zers who are only familiar with older bands like AC/DC, Metallica, Led Zeppelin, etc., and don't really follow any newer bands, which has helped diminish the genre as a whole. Do I think it will be popular again? Hopefully so, but I don't think it will be the same. With so many dipshits that run the music industry, metal, for all I know, could evolve into something that sounds really gay, like baby metal, for example. Alright, his second question. Do you miss Chester Bennington from Linkin Park? Yeah, I kinda do. Now, I was never really that big into Linkin Park to begin with. Hell, they're not even on my top 10 favorite new metal bands of all time. But I did like their first two albums from Hybrid Theory and Meteora, before they started to water down their sound to make it more commercially friendly for all the pussy mainstream audience out there. So I was never really into the band, but rest in peace, Chester Bennington. And your third question. If you were the most powerful man in the universe, what would you do to make the world and society better? Dude, that is a very broad question you asked there, and I really don't want to spend too much time on this answer, because I don't want to make this video go on too long. But just to kind of give you a lazy answer, it's basically everything Corey said in that video of how he would reboot today's society. And basically, if you listen to any of my earlier Q&As, you would know how I would improve the music industry. But just to sprinkle in a few things that I would add to Corey's custom world, for starters, being ghetto will be illegal, which means no more saying the N-word, sagging pants, and talking all this hood nonsense. Mosquitoes and all these other insects that bite would not exist, because I am getting sick and tired of getting bitten by these stupid-ass insects every summertime. But wait, what are bats and frogs gonna do for food? Guys, I'm a god, okay? I can create different types of food for those animals, as long as it doesn't bother me or other people for that matter. Same with rats and mice, they're not gonna exist. As a matter of fact, I'm gonna add this also. No more of these creepy or ugly ass animals like bats and naked mole rats, because they creep me out. Every animal on this planet is gonna look adorable or not ugly, and they're gonna be harmless also. So you as human beings are not gonna have to worry about lions or chimpanzees attacking you, because they're gonna be harmless. And so yeah, reptiles and amphibians are gonna eat different types of insects that do not bother humans, and ugly and creepy animals are not gonna exist. And so yeah, that's one of the things I'd change about the world. Also, religion would not exist in this world. It would only exist in fictional media like movies and TV shows, or even video games that use it as a storyline, but it's not going to exist. As a matter of fact, it's going to be banned. And the only people that are going to believe in all that bullcrap are a bunch of delusional weirdos. And if some type of person tries to brainwash people into believing all that shit, then they're going to be strike down to death. And yeah, I do know that because I'm a god of my own universe, that people would want to praise me and kiss my ass. And I wouldn't really want all of that stuff, because I just want people to live their lives however they want to. Although there will be ground rules, because we can't have people doing whatever the hell they want and just letting all this bad taste spread. Because I'm gonna create my own version of the Bible, where it's gonna teach you all the things of how to be an outstanding member of society with the best taste possible. And you as a human being must abide by these rules. Otherwise, you will be a failure in my world. And I'm gonna make sure to have a lot less restrictions in the entertainment industry. Nothing is going to be watered down BS, because edginess is going to be mainstream all around. Like, you're gonna have kick-ass metal music in the mainstream, more blood and guts anime, and a wrestling product that's more badass than the Attitude Era or ECW. And also, since I'm a god of my own world and I control the universe, I'm gonna give the souls a free will to create their own body on what type of human being they want to be or look like. Cause you have a lot of people out there not wanting to accept who they are, or not accepting how they were born to look like. Whether it's wanting to change their own gender, or have all these plastic surgeries to look a certain way, whether it's trying to look like a fictional character, or changing their own nationality and all that shit. So instead of creating human beings to be born a certain way, whether it's being born completely normal or being born with a disability like being born without legs, the souls are going to have the option to customize their own human body. And you only get one chance, which means no second chances. If you choose to look like a celebrity like Chris Hemsworth, then you're going to look like that for the rest of your life. And that's how it's gonna be like. Kind of like you're creating your own wrestler from a WWE game, except it's gonna be your own human body. So if you're black that wants to look white, then you're gonna have that option. If you're an Asian person that wants to be born Indian, then you're gonna be born Indian. That's how it's gonna be. And that's basically what I would do if I was the most powerful man in the universe. So there you go. Alright, so the next question comes from Durka Dietrich, and he asks, if Brandon Lee never died, do you think he would have made it big? Or do you think his role in The Crow would have been his one-time big movie? I personally think Brandon Lee would have been a big star had he never gotten accidentally shot on set. Cause the guy was so talented. He was a pretty good looking guy, no homo. I mean, he was the son of Bruce Lee for God's sake. And he was a pretty good actor. It seemed like Brandon Lee had a lot going for him to be some kind of big movie star. But unfortunately, his life was taken from us tragically. And it's a real shame. Because I do know for a fact that Brandon Lee was originally supposed to play Johnny Cage in the 1995 Mortal Kombat movie, and I think he would have done better than Lyndon Ashby. Not to say that he was a bad Johnny Cage, but I would have loved to have seen what it would have been like seeing Brandon Lee playing Johnny Cage, because he was a good actor, and I know for a fact that he could do martial arts. I mean, I personally believe The Crow wouldn't be that big a hit had he never died, but I think the positive reception the movie received would have gotten him a lot of big movie roles. Hell, if Brandon Lee never died, then I personally believe that we would have never gotten the shitty Crow sequels or remakes, or whatever you want to call them. I mean, who knows, maybe Brandon Lee would have been up to reprise his role to do a sequel. But again, it's a real shame that his life was taken from us. And in a way, I kinda prefer if the Crow movie never was made, because then he'd still be with us. I mean, as much as I love the movie, I'd rather a talented actor still be alive to play other big roles in other movies, while also living life with his fiancée so he could have had a family. And it's very frustrating on what his career could have been like. The guy died so young, just like his father. I wish something could have been done to prevent it, but what can you do? And his second question, which movie do you think is better, Halloween 1978 or Halloween 2 from 1981? Also, the Rob Zombie Halloween movies were trash. I personally didn't mind the Rob Zombie remake. I just thought it was okay, although I do agree the sequel to the remake absolutely sucked. But as for which Halloween movie I prefer between the first and second, I prefer the first movie a tad bit more, but the sequel was still good and very underrated in my view. Like, I'm not sure why people say the sequel isn't as good, because I thought the sequel was just as creepy and suspenseful as the first movie. And I'd say it's the best Halloween sequel aside from Halloween 4 and H2O. But I prefer the first one because of the whole mystery and slow build behind it. But Halloween 2 is still an amazing sequel. So there you go. Alright, this next question comes from Blake Steele. And he asks, why do you think a Michael Myers and Jason Voorhees movie hasn't happened yet? The same reason for why it took over a decade for Freddy vs. Jason to happen. Two different studios own the rights to the characters, and eventually New Lines got the rights to Friday the 13th, so it was easy to make the movie. And honestly, that's one crossover movie I've always wanted to see. Even more than Freddy vs. Jason, just because of how similar the two characters are. To me, the crossover should have happened in the 90s, and it would have been one hell of a movie back then because Jason Voorhees and Michael Myers are a perfect match for each other. His second question: what are some of your favorite 90s grunge bands? My favorites are the big four from the Seattle grunge era, from Nirvana, Alice in Chains, even though I never considered them grunge, Soundgarden, and Pearl Jam. And even other bands like Stone Temple Pilots, Smashing Pumpkins, and a few female bands like Garbage. And no, they're not actually Garbage. That's just their name. But I did like a lot of their songs. L7 is a really kick-ass band and personally my favorite female grunge band. And anybody who loves good rock music, listen to their 1992 album called Bricks Are Heavy, which is personally my favorite album from them. Veruca Salt is another good band. And I kinda like Letters to Cleo. They're not bad. And I think are underrated. And his third question: which was better, Fox Kids or Kids WB? No question, Fox Kids. Because they had more shows that I enjoyed, from Batman, Spider-Man, X-Men, the animated series, Power Rangers, The Tick, Beast Wars, Transformers, Tiny Toon Adventures, and all that shit. So there you go. Alright, so the next question we have here is from John Cool. Why won't the Smarks get it through their thick skull that vanilla midgets will never draw in major wrestling companies? Because they're a bunch of entitled nerds that don't want to admit when they're wrong. It's really that simple. They're a bunch of delusional losers that try to act like their shit don't stink. And the wrestling business has to suffer for that because they choose to listen to them. So there you go. And his third question: who are your top 10 favorite wrestlers of all time? Well, obviously The Undertaker, Stone Cold Steve Austin, The Rock, Sting, Rob Van Dam, Shawn Michaels, Raven, Mick Foley, Razor Ramon, and Kane. And as for the other wrestlers that I like are Jeff Hardy, Scott Steiner, Hollywood Hogan, Mr. Perfect, Jake the Snake Roberts, Macho Man Randy Savage, Rowdy Piper, The Ravishing Rick Rude, and Edge. So there you go. And his third question: what were your thoughts on the WWF In Your House pay-per-views? I actually like the In Your House pay-per-views. Even though the WWF wasn't in the best financial state, but they did give me a lot of fond memories, as that was the time that I started getting into wrestling, which was around 1996. I actually still own the pay-per-views on VHS, and will sometimes watch them if I feel like it. And just from saying that, I feel so old. But yeah, they were awesome back then. And Canadian Stampede is still my favorite from the In Your House era. So there's my thoughts. Alright, so the next question comes from Flight 20K. And he asks, are there any TV shows, music, movies, and video games that you like that everybody else hates? Well, for movies, there is the Dolph Lundgren Punisher movie. And I really don't understand why that movie gets so much hate. I mean, this was a badass 80s action flick, and people hate on it because he didn't have the skull or something. Like, I don't know. This movie was everything you would have ever wanted from a Punisher movie, and the fact that people shit on it makes me wonder what people even want in a Punisher movie. So that's one of them. Next is Batman Forever. I mean, besides Tommy Lee Jones' version of Two-Face, I thought Batman Forever was enjoyable, and people try to make it seem like it's on the same level as Batman and Robin. No, Batman and Robin was a piece of shit movie. Batman Forever was actually entertaining. So let's see, some other movies that I enjoyed were the Texas Chainsaw Massacre remake from 2003, the one with Jessica Biel, and the 2009 Friday the 13th remake, which I don't understand why that movie gets so much hate. And two other movies that I enjoyed were RoboCop 2 and Predator 2, which are two sequels that get a lot of undeserving hate, and I don't understand why. For games, I can't really think of anything. TV shows, I don't know, maybe Mortal Kombat Conquest. And for music, it would have to be nu metal. And his next question: have you ever listened to Level when they had Bobby Reeves as the singer before he joined Edema back in 2006? One of their songs was used in Twisted Metal Head On. Yeah, I have. They're a pretty decent band. I haven't listened to too much of the band though, but I have listened to a few of their songs from their 2003 self-entitled album, and they're not bad. I don't quite enjoy the band as much as I did for Edema before Mark Chavez left the band in 2004. I personally stopped caring about the band after Mark Chavez left, just because it wasn't the same without him. Even now, I still hear that they're still kind of making music, but Mark Chavez, from what I hear, still doesn't want to return. I don't know what his reason was, but what can you do? Alright, so the next question comes from a Rated RK Edge, and he asks, what are your thoughts on AEW versus NXT? I don't give a shit, dude. Like, I really don't. Moving on. Alright, so the next question comes from Too Edgy For You, and he asks, what's your favorite pay-per-view from the original ECW? I'd definitely say Heatwave 98, because you had a lot of good matches on that show, from like Taz versus Bam Bam Bigelow, Tommy Dreamer, Spike Dudley, and the Sandman taking on the Dudley Boys. You had Mike Awesome versus Masato Tanaka. You had RVD and Sabu taking on the team of Hayabusa. And it was just a really cool high-flying hardcore match between those two teams. So yeah, I'd have to say ECW Heatwave 98. His next question, who are some modern wrestlers that you like? The modern wrestlers that I like are Killer Cross. You know, he's pretty badass. You have Elias Sampson, Brian Cage, he's a fucking badass. Eli Drake, you know, he's someone that could be the next Rock. And even female wrestlers like Scarlett Bordeaux and Rosemary from that one faction called Decay, which was a pretty cool faction. And even a few wrestlers from AEW like Jimmy Havoc, MJF, and Darby Allin are the few that I like. Which really is not saying much because those are like the few wrestlers that I like from AEW, which is pretty pathetic. By the way, fuck AEW. Alright, so the next question comes from Ray Hood, and he asked me, what are your top 5 favorite comic book movies? The Crow, Batman in 1989, the first Blade movie, the 2012 Dredd movie, and the first Deadpool movie, so there you go. Alright, so Becky Silva asks, what are your top 5 favorite metal bands of all time from the 90s? Pantera, Machine Head, Fear Factory, Sepultura, and Korn. Her second question. Do you agree that the 1980s was the best decade for horror movies? Yes, it was. I mean, for me, the 80s was honestly that decade where most of the best horror movies were at. From Child's Play, Friday the 13th, Nightmare on Elm Street, Hellraiser, The Thing remake, The Blob remake, The Fly remake, Fright Night, and I can go on. Like, I mean, the 80s was just packed with a lot of great horror movies. Plus, the 80s was basically the last decade for filmmakers to only rely on practical effects before CGI started to become a thing in the 90s, which was good because you got to see a lot of really good blood and gore scenes that looked real, at least for the most part. Some people will say that the practical effects looked cheesy, but I'll take practical effects any day of the week over bullshit CGI. So yeah, the 80s ruled. Alright, so the next question comes from Timothy Haas. What are your thoughts on Shenmue 3? Honestly, like, I was never really into Shenmue, as I've always found the first and second game to be really boring. Like, I'm just not into a lot of these open world games. I find them boring and they take way too long for me to get into. So I don't really care about the new game coming out. Alright, next question comes from Steel316. What's your favorite candies on Halloween? Well, I most certainly don't like a candy corn because that shit tastes nasty. But I do enjoy Milky Way, so there you go. And last but certainly not least, the final question comes from Dante Knight. And he asks, have you ever watched the Tales of the Crypt series? Yeah, I have seen the series. And I gotta say, I'm enjoying it so far. And yes, I didn't grow up watching it because I didn't have HBO back then. and my parents probably wouldn't allow me to watch it anyways. But I do remember seeing commercials for it back then, and I really wish I had seen the series a lot sooner because the show itself is a lot like Are You Afraid of the Dark and Goosebumps, but made for adults. And I like it, but I haven't watched too much of the episodes though. Like, I have seen a few episodes of the first season, especially the Christmas episode, and like I said, I'm enjoying it so far. I believe you can watch certain episodes on YouTube, which is nice, so I'm gonna keep watching. And that's pretty much it for my Q&A. Ugh. Finally, I am done. This was a long one for me, so yeah. But anyways, I hope you enjoyed. Don't eat too much candy, and I wish you all a happy Halloween.